right. Welcome, everybody, to the Bodacity Show. I am Jeanette Anderson, your hostess with the mostest, and I am really glad that you're here with this beautiful panel of amazing women who are talking about a super important topic that all of us likely have or will have to deal with at some point in our lives, and that's caring for other people, caring for loved ones, caring for family members. And in that process, we often don't care for ourselves, and that's really critical. And, you know, they say that old cliche of put your mask on first for a reason. So it's really important that we learn how to take care of ourselves. So welcome, ladies. I'm really super glad you're all here. What I'd love to do is launch in. We have your full bios in the notes below. So I encourage everybody to read about these fascinating women and why they've been selected to come and share with you, because all of them have real specific expertise in areas where they have worked with either professionally or in their personal experience, and even written about it, etc. How they took care of people in their lives, the impact of it, and how they came through it and intact in one piece, and in fact how they've turned it into businesses and a livelihood. So welcome, ladies. I'm really thrilled you're all here. Hi.
Hello.
So what I'd love to do is have you just introduce yourself briefly, give us your name, where you are, and just like a sentence or two about what you do so people kind of have a sense of where you're speaking from.
Okay. Hi, my name's Brenda Pallin McIntosh. I'm from Grand Prairie, Alberta. I am a registered nurse, also a life care advocate. I have a business called Seniors Best Life that helps to advocate, navigate, and support people going through life care transitions. And I am passionate about people having, giving them their voice to figure out what it is they really want and support them through that.
All right, we're going to come back to those whys in just a moment. So I want to hear more about that passion. Chelsea, how about you?
My name is Chelsea Yanni. I'm Director of Care of Longevity Care based here in Calgary. We service Calgary and rural areas, so the small towns. So what we do is I provide specialized home care to people of all age ranges, but we specialize in senior care. It's just a passion of mine that developed throughout my nursing career that I've come to love every part of what I do, from helping people in those crisis moments and at home to all along the journey to sometimes palliative care. So.
Hi, I'm Cheryl Jennings, and I am in Oklahoma, only one in the U.S., I guess, today. But I am very happy to be part of this panel. I have a son who is special needs. He has cerebral palsy and severe enough that he requires total care. He's now 52. We've gone through an awful lot of different events that have been difficult we've had to manage, and during that time, I helped with my own parents. My dad had a surgery that went wrong. He became an invalid, so we helped with him. And my mother-in-law for 17 years after her husband died. So this has been my life. I've been part of caregiving from the very beginning. My grandfather was even cared for 15 years. So I've been a part of a lot of different groups. I've been on the radio. I've interviewed about 150 caregivers. And I was trying to learn, what do we need to pass on to younger people? But in the meantime, I've written books and done a lot of speaking and interviews, and I love being a part of sharing what we've learned to help it make it easier for people coming behind us.
Awesome. Thank you. And later on, I would love you to tell us about your books. All right, Patricia.
Patricia Morgan here from Calgary, Alberta, Canada. And I am a therapist, so I end up being kind of a caregiver for that session. In my personal life, I have supported a daughter-in-law in her last year of life. I have supported my mother in her last years of life, and I am a daily supporter of our daughter, our adopted daughter, who lives with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It's a physiology and mental disorder, as well as her son, our 19-year-old grandson.
Okay, so we've got lots of breadth of experience for you. People who come from dealing with it themselves, people who have turned it into businesses, etc. And really, if you've got questions, please do put them in the chat. I really want to hear them. And even if afterwards you think of questions, put them there and tag whichever expert you'd like to respond to it, because we really want to get you resources and ideas and tips here today, really practically. So tell me, ladies, why do you care so much about this? Now, I get that for all of us, for me, my interest in this is having taken care of a mother with dementia for many, many years. She required a lot of care, a lot of advocacy. Had I not advocated for her, she would have had both her legs amputated, because there's not a lot of intercommunication between and within the medical industry. And so if you don't have advocacy, as I was talking with Brenda earlier, a little bit screwed or a lot screwed, depending. And also dealing with seniors homes who are not always good to their residents, and who, especially when their residents are not pleasant, like my mother, then it can be very challenging to ensure that they're not being abused. And so, having dealt with that personally, I know the challenges and the tolls, practically, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and spiritually. For me, it took me in the last couple of years of her life about a week a month to take her to appointments and do things and so forth and so on. When you're self-employed, that's 25% of your income that you have to either work harder to overcome and make up, or that you lose. And if you're the sole breadwinner, that is a big challenge. So it has economic impact as well. So we want to talk about all of those things, how you mitigate them, how you live with them, how you get around them, and take care of yourself and still have some fun in the process with the people that you're taking care of. So tell me, ladies, why are you so passionate about this subject? So who, just jump in, whoever would like to go first.
I will start then. Having a son that had cerebral palsy 50 years ago, doctors didn't even know what it was. And we were told several things, you know, he'll never walk, he'll never talk, he'll never amount to anything, put him away, forget you ever had him. And then when I was, you know, distressed, we had moved across the country for help. The doctor said that to me and said, I'll try to keep him out of the school we just moved to get him a part of at 2 years old, because we didn't know what to do ourselves. And I just said, at least where we lived, we could have therapy for once a month. We'd have to drive 100 miles for it then. And he said, well, if you want therapy, then go get it for yourself. It'll never help him. And he's been so wrong. And although Blake has never walked, he has learned to communicate. He became an artist while they were trying to use range of motion. It's taken a long time to teach him anything. And there are a lot of comments that are made along the way from people who think they know more than you do about what you should be doing for your child. And I just realized when I went back to finish my degree, it was in communications, and I was asked to do a video about why communication breaks down in families that have special needs kids. And when I interviewed doctors, educators, parents, anybody that worked with them, I learned a lot about why it does break down. And so my goal has been, there's not been a good system of finding out what you need. The divorce rate is 87 to 90% when they have a special needs child. And my desire is to make that turnaround and get to the point where we can help at the beginning with diagnosis to try to help support families and teach them communication skills that will make it better, and teach doctors how to be hopeful instead of hopeless with their families.
Absolutely, Cheryl. I couldn't agree more. I have a client who has cerebral palsy and speaks and advocates. His mother was also told, he'll never walk, he'll never be anything, just park him in a box and leave him there. And he now has a PhD, works for a large corporation, does advocacy, skis, bike rides, etc., with severe cerebral palsy. And he, the point to this is, without mothers who say hell no, neither your son nor he would have any quality of life. And so one of the first tips that you need to take away here is that we often will give our power to what I call M deities, So the medical profession and doctors who say this is the way it is not necessarily the way it is. So do
Right.
not be afraid as a caregiver to advocate, to push back, and to get second and third opinions, to educate yourself, to take care of yourself by knowing that you are being a good steward of the information, whether it's about you or someone you love. Just because a doctor says something doesn't mean it's the case.
Right.
So yeah, so good for you for advocating and for saying, hell no, that's not how this is going to go. And thank you for also bringing up the impact on relationship. That's something that I know, Patricia, as a therapist, you see a lot as well. So tell us about your why. Why do you do what you do, Patricia?
Well, it goes way back to when I was 14 years of age and my little baby brother was born, and we didn't have an extra bed in our home on the farm. And he slept with me. And I toilet trained him, et cetera, et cetera. And all of a sudden I had value in the family, because on the farm, the girl doesn't have any value. So I saw myself for years as only having value when I was looking after somebody else. So it's pretty innate. And, some people call it people pleasing. And then some of the professionals, when I stepped up for my daughter, would say I was enabling, I didn't know anything. And I now know, as a wise older woman, I know her better than she knows herself. And so somebody tells me what I should be doing, I say, thank you for the information. That's about it. So yeah, so it's quite deep with me, and I revel in being, if I'm being helpful. I can get agitated if my helpfulness isn't making a difference, and I've had to let that go. I've really had to let that go, because with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, there's so much that I can give information, but it's about 25% actually gets rolling. So yeah, and one of the ways I've begun to think about my role is explaining the world to my loved ones with the disability, and explaining my loved ones to the world.
Yep.
So I'm a translator. I'm basically an advocate and translator.
Right. Awesome. That's a great framing on that. And you brought up something that I want to come back to, because I think it's a really important point, is identifying as a caregiver, and really how we can sometimes lose ourselves in that role and in that identity as well.
Yes,
right.
I've burned out 3 times.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very important. That's why we want to have this conversation. All right, Chelsea, how about you? Why are you so passionate about being a caregiver, such that you became a nurse and now you're taking care of this, and had a business and have a business taking care of people? Like, obviously it's deep. So why is it so deep?
Yeah, so it starts when I was a little girl watching my mom care for her parents. We lived, again, out on a farm, and so we lived across the river. So she'd go every day and care for them. And I was the youngest of 4, so was she. So she had that role kind of given to her because we lived the closest, and then I would tag along all the time. So I saw her as it progressed in my grandparents' care. From my grandma had severe arthritis, and my mom would have to, change her tens and soil beds and all of that. And plus my mom had 4 kids, and she was running around and busy in sports, and just seeing that balance. And it wasn't until I was a little bit older, and then I kind of, we had a journey of them going through all sorts of systems and moving care homes and advocating for them. And then I became a nurse, and I had different paths, but I ended up in senior care, and it's what I love. It's where my heart lies. Ever since I was a little girl, you'd find me tucked in a corner visiting with the senior and hearing their stories, and it's just something that's dear to me. And one of the biggest pieces is I've realized that I'm what they call an Enneagram 2. So that's typically empathetic, sincere, warm-hearted. That's kind of the nature, but you're also motivated by a need to be loved and needed. That a little bit is my drive to, you balance that. You don't want to always take, like you don't always need it, but it's something that I know that's my heart, is always wanting to serve. And so being able to be in home care, I have such a vast array of dealing with people in facilities, dealing with people in the home. We're dealing with sons and daughters who are caring for a mom and dad, a spouse who's caring for a loved one. We have stuff, across the whole care continuum from, we're advocating for clients in senior care homes where just recently it was not good scenarios happening. So just being able to be a voice sometimes for families who don't know how to step up and being able to be there just to support them along the way. So.
Awesome. All right. Thank you. And Brenda.
Oh boy, my passion started too when I was younger. I was always with either the nurses in the little community I was at, or when my grandmother was dying, I was the only grandchild that would sit with her while she was dying. And I do have a passion for end of life care, but I also have a passion for helping people to know what questions to ask. Because I think, and I learned that with when I was working in pediatric ICU, where parents didn't know what questions to ask and what they were allowed to do in the healthcare. And that's carried on with my nursing. And I've been really frustrated with the healthcare system. I worked 20 years in the States, and then I've since been back to Canada for the last 14 years. And the difference in care and advocacy when you don't have a choice in Canada of who you see and how care is delivered makes it hard for people to feel empowered and knowing what questions to ask. And I rock the boat a lot in healthcare. I step out of the boundaries quite a bit, which is has been an issue for me and my managers. But my place is to advocate for people and help them know what questions they can ask, because so many people don't know what questions they can ask. And I want to help people with that. And right from young parents with kids, when I brought my son home from the hospital, and I thought, how do people become a parent and not be a nurse? I'm like, there's no books. And I think as aging happens, there's no real, unless you're experiencing it, you don't know, and you need someone who can at least help you guide and trigger some questions. So I also have taken care of a neighbor who didn't have anybody and helped him. And that's what made me decide to start this business of with Seniors Best Life. So there's been a lot of things in my life and situations that I feel that I can contribute and help people navigate the systems.
So I love, and I hear a real theme, of course, of our own personal experiences push us to want to support others in not struggling and tripping over the things that we've tripped over, which of course makes total sense for supporting styles who caregiver, people who tend to become caregivers are, like Chelsea mentioned, the real supportive styles, the people who really want to be there, but not everybody has that desire and or wants to do it to the degree that we get pressed into. And so I want to talk a little bit about a number of things. One is burnout. How do we avoid that? How do we take care of ourselves? Two is boundaries. How do we set boundaries for ourselves and others in this process? And really, what are some of the practical tips and hints that you have discovered in your journey that other people might not be aware of that they should be taking care of or thinking about or doing when they're dealing with that? So again, whether or not you have a family member that you're supporting or advocating for, or even yourself in when you have some kind of issues or medical challenges, almost all of us go through some kind of medical healing crisis at some point or another. So we have to advocate for ourselves as well. So caring for yourself as your caregiver for yourself is also important. So let's talk about the first one. Dealing with the burnout, dealing with the demand, dealing with both, like all the facets of it, the emotional demand, because often the people who are struggling and that we're taking care of either don't have the capacity to, or are in pain or struggling and can't or are not often very nice to us. So there can be real challenges with that. There can be challenges with the amount of time There can be challenges with the whole spiritual question of, why them, why me, etc. So physically, emotionally, mentally, it's very challenging. How do you know that you're approaching, let's start with, if you've been burnt out, how do you know you're approaching burnout? How do you know that you're doing too much? What are some of the first signs that people can watch for? Go ahead.
I've got a little acronym that kind of describes a person in that situation, and it's COPE. C for cluttered mind. You just can't think well, there's so much going on. Then you're overwhelmed, and then you begin to have a pity party. Why me? Why this? And you start really feeling sorry for yourself, and you think you're the only one in the world that is dealing with this. And then you become an emotional wreck. So that's your COPE. But I just have discovered a lot of things along the way. The why me part was one of the things that we learned early on, that if you want to try to find out why you, then start saying, why not me? Why somebody else? Who would you rather have it? Because the answer to that question does not bring you closer to any answer. You've got to decide, okay, I've got this problem. Now, what's it going to do to me? Is it going to make me a bitter person and no one wants to hang around with me? Or will I become a better person and be able to help other people? And I think when we get to the point we can actually reach out and help other people because we know what they're going through, that we heal ourselves a lot by doing that. The part about the physical, though, was something that nobody talked about a long time ago. They didn't even know what to do with kids, so they never thought about the parent. And I worked so hard trying to do everything that we needed to do and had other children, and then took in my mother-in-law when my father-in-law died. I ended up so ill. I had to be cared for 6 months, and our son immediately had to have somebody else help us with him.
Mhm.
And through the years, it's been a real challenge. And the last few years of 5 years ago, he was very ill, losing weight, and they said, well, we need to put a feeding tube in. Well, I was down in Texas trying to help take care of my mom, and then she passed away, and we went to go take care of our son. And my husband had been, at the first of the year, he almost died. And so it was a really hard year for us, but we went to have this day surgery, and the doctor comes out and says, I'm sorry, that was the hardest surgery I've ever done. 2 hours in there, he found that his heart and stomach were grown together. And so he was trying to separate to be able to get tubes where they needed to go, and he punctured him a lot. So he ends up in ICU, very ill, dying. They come in a few days and say, we need to do surgery again. They go in, he's not better. And all of a sudden, a hospitalist slams open the door, comes into the ICU and says, here, I need you to sign these DNR papers right now. And I'm like, we haven't talked about that right now. I know he's bad, but I want to talk to the doctor. And she said, you don't have time. And I said, what do you mean I don't have time? I'm not going to just sign that. And she said, well, look at him, and pointed. And he's laying in a bed watching and hearing everything she said. And she said, look at him. He has no quality of life. And that's the treatment that so many times families get, that they give up. They don't know what to do. And like you said, they don't know who to go to for answers. They don't know what to look for when they're searching. So that's part of the things I try to do, is help them understand you got to learn to stand up, speak up, and your voice has to be heard. But it's up to you to find the knowledge. You can't expect other people to tell you what you need to know. Your child is different from everybody else. But those
Yeah.
are the symptoms that I think help define who's ready for a breakdown.
Right. So I like the COPE acronym: cluttered mind, overwhelmed, pity party, and emotional wreck. That helps you to start to identify some of the symptoms that might be going on in terms of burnout. Chelsea, you work with a lot of care providers. How do you recognize when they're approaching burnout, or how do you help them avoid getting burned out when they do this for a living?
So you're speaking more so not like a family caregiver, but the
Yeah,
like
your professional caregivers who do.
professional caregivers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm managing it closely. You know what? No matter if it's a family or professional, everybody waits for that crisis moment when it's like when you're at that burnout, and it's like I think the biggest thing is talking about it. So we have regular touch points, weekly touch points saying, hey, how's it going? You might have a really challenging dementia client, and you also have, your own family issues, but then you're professionally dealing with some stress. And so as a professional, you know a little bit how to balance, but then you get to a point where it's just about checking in and just saying, hey, how you doing? I do that with some of my caregivers who have really, really challenging, aggressive clients or really heavy. Just saying, talk it out. Do you need a break? Like, do I need to fill in a few shifts to give you a week off? Is there something that we can do to tackle this together? Just kind of being aware of just the humanity, that they're a person as well. And that no matter if you're a family caregiver or a professional, you're still gonna, that professional piece, you learn a few tools and you can sometimes dissociate when you go home. That's another piece is educating and training about how to, leave it on the job and not to carry that. And by nature, caregivers are empathetic. And so that's something that is hard to leave behind, but largely just communicating, talking, touch points, checking in with them.
So communication is really important both ways. And what I heard both in Cheryl's and I know, from personal experience and from what Chelsea said is people who are in that situation tend to push and push and push until they cannot any longer, rather than taking care proactively, which is why this panel was so important to me, is we burn ourselves out by being a martyr, by pushing and pushing and not asking for support. So let's talk about how do we ask, because that's A, very rewarded in our society. B, we are cast in the role of you're the caregiver and often have the feeling like there is no choice. That is just the way it is, and there isn't any other option. And so in that feeling, we just have to do it. When there's shoulds and have tos, then that weighs us down. So how do we ask for support? So how do we know that we need it? And then how do we ask for support? Patricia, you mentioned you burned out 3 times. How and you're a professional at giving and asking for support. So how did you know you were burning out, and how do you advocate that people ask for support?
Well, I think a support system is incredibly important because it's hard when you're in the pickle jar to know what's going on for you. 2 times that I burned out was somebody asked me genuinely, like people I knew really cared about me, said, how are you really? And I just burst into tears. So it's like this reflection comes back. And then once you clue in, and I think that's where we're social beings. We need people around us that care about us, right? Mm-hmm. Then you want to also in your social circle have people that you can ask to delegate and say, I want your help. The other one is, because I often felt guilty saying no, I started saying it's not good for me to say yes. And when I hear myself saying it's not good for me to say yes, I'm giving a message to somebody else, but I'm also giving a message to myself that I'm at risk if I say yes to this, because my tendency is to always say yes. So I still say yes, but I frame it a little differently that I can absorb. And it's interesting in the philosophy of women, it's very difficult for women to say no, because no is a distancer with relationships. It says back off. And we are hardwired for relationships. So psychology wise, it's comforting to know that that's what goes on for us, this difficulty with saying no.
Mm-hmm. So it's not good for me to say yes, or it's not good for me to say yes to this request, or it's not good for me to say yes at this time.
Or this time, exactly.
Mm-hmm. All right. And so when you're talking about advocacy, Brenda, what is the framing that you have around that in terms of creating support, being a support, but also asking for support?
I think one of the things when you approached me about this caring for the caregiver is a lot of times as a caregiver, we don't know what we need to take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. So people often, my husband went through cancer treatment last fall, and people kept saying, don't forget to take care of yourself. I'm like, I'm so stressed out. I don't have any idea what that means. And I have a friend whose husband is going through they're going through a really big health crisis right now. And we were just talking about it the other day. She said, I don't know what that means to take care of myself. All I know is that I'm trying to breathe
Mhm.
one day at a time. And so there were some things that when we were talking, I said, well, let me handle those things. Cause she's like, I have to go to this place and that place. And I think it's what Patricia is saying is it's gathering those people around you
Mhm.
and saying, okay, who can do this task for you? And being an advocate for the person saying, okay, let me deal
Mhm.
with this, telling the caregiver who's about to burn out or is ready to crumble to the ground, let me help you do this, and be very concrete with it. They
Mhm.
have enough stuff going through their head. They're just trying to breathe. They're just trying to wake up in the morning to take the next step. And so that it's important to figure out who. It could be one person, it could be a couple, but that can and an advocate who can say, here, let's break this down for you. But I think we expect too much from the caregiver to make more decisions. They're already trying to make decisions.
They have decision fatigue.
Yeah.
It's a very real thing. When you have to make too many decisions, you get bad at making decisions. You cannot
Yeah.
make yet another decision. And so one of the things that I hear in that is ask for support earlier than you think you need it, rather than later when you're on your, in bed for 6 months or on your knees or so debilitated that you can barely raise your hand and say help. So one of the things that I advocate is be the source of that which you would like more of. So for example, when my best friend got leukemia, I arranged a spreadsheet, sent it out to all our friends and said, here, sign up for something. And there was cleaning her house, cooking, doing grocery shopping, so various tasks, and they could sign up for various things. That was not something she was able to or would have asked for herself, but a friend could arrange that and organize that, and then it was taken off her plate. Therefore, I was able to do that for myself. And I don't know if it was a therefore, but it certainly made it a lot easier. When I broke my leg and had to move and so forth, I did the same thing. Spreadsheet. I need help. I need people to come and paint my house. I need people to come and help with this and that. And I had a beautiful community of supporters and friends and who came and helped me with that. But they wouldn't have if they didn't know that I needed it, if I hadn't been willing to ask and put a little structure around it to make it feasible for them. So help people help you, and be willing to ask, because then we can be the supporter for the other person, because we can't give when our cup's empty. Cheryl.
Well, I was just going to add to that. A lot of times people don't know how to ask, and they're really hurting, and they're wondering why people come to them and say, oh, you're doing such a good job, I could never do that. And they never think to ask, what do you need? So I
Yeah.
think part of the education is also educating the world, your neighbors, the community, to understand what happened in that family when all of a sudden they've got somebody with cancer or an older person that has to be cared for, and they're confined to home, and that
Yeah.
person can't even go to the bathroom without somebody needing them. And so it involves a lot more of teaching them it's okay to ask, because they don't read your mind. And that's the part that sometimes is really hard for us. And I even had a man ask me one time, he said, I'm single. And so everybody thinks I'm the one that doesn't have anything to do, and I have to take care of this relative. And I said, well, have you asked them to help you with anything? He said, no, I just thought they ought to know what to do. So it's not just women that need that. We all do. We don't understand what it's like to be burdened like that. And it's almost too much. We don't really want to know more than we have to, because then we would really feel bad for somebody and think, oh, maybe I need to do more, and not really want to do that. But it is an education process.
Yeah.
And that's what I hope. I mean, I'm hearing all of you thinking that. And Chelsea, it's so neat that you can say to somebody who's a paid caregiver, do you need a break? What's going on? And that's the kind of support that would really benefit in the community. And I try to help people understand. I've got a friend I have never met in person. We've been friends with text for 6 years. and we keep up with each other. And when we're having a hard time, just that one person knowing and saying, okay, what are you doing for yourself? Are you able to rest? Can you sleep? Whatever. It helps just to have one person. But I've also had parents who have, maybe they're a single parent, and they'll write and they'll say, I have 2 special needs kids. What am I supposed to do? I don't have anybody to help me. So we're going to have to extend that education to people as a neighbor or as somebody that's their friendship or in the churches or whatever, to help them understand, reach out, help them.
Well, and one of the things that I think that women often think is we have to be the giver and not the receiver, which is,
Right.
bull hockey. So we need to get over that, because frankly, when we don't allow others to give, then we're being kind of greedy and egotistical. Like, I get to be the giver, but you don't. Like, get over yourself. Like, it has to be both ways. We need to also be receivers and fill our cups. Otherwise, we don't have anything to give. But it is also a gift to give. And so give people the opportunity to give. But if they don't want to, they don't have to. You can simply say, what I'd really appreciate is X. And if that doesn't work for you, feel free to say no. That's a magical sentence. If that doesn't work for you, feel free to say no. Gives them permission to say no, which also gives them permission to say yes. And you can stop being the caretaker of the other person and just simply ask. Ask cleanly and clearly. The other thing that I really want to reinforce here is we do not have to do it all. Just like if we were in a job in a corporation and we had a team or something, we would delegate or we would hire someone else to do it. There are resources. So there's a lot of reasons why we think we have to do it all, and why we hold on to it so tightly. And that comes back to that conversation around our identity and who we think we are and have to be in order to be lovable and to be a good daughter or a good friend or a good whatever. So let's talk about, why don't we hire services like Chelsea's? Why don't we delegate more? Why don't we get more support in the world? What is it that gets in the way of us taking care of ourselves and delegating and doing things a little differently or more easily? So Patricia, as a counselor, you have lots of background with this in terms of what gets in the way of us stepping out of the roles we think we have to be in.
Well, typically it's a lot of shame, right? I'm less than. You have to have some good self-steady concept to be able to stand up and say, I need some help. And it's an admission of some vulnerability. And of course, we know there's a lot of shaming in our culture about being vulnerable. So it's a whole hierarchy piece that goes on. And yeah, I really like the point about people don't know how to ask for help. They often don't even know what they want. They often don't even know what their passions are. I remember counseling with a woman with 5 kids. She could tell me the favorite dinner and dessert of her 5 children and her husband, but she didn't know what she liked to eat herself. So you definitely can get lost in this.
And we start to think that we are our roles. I am a mother, and that's what I am. I am a caregiver, and that's what I am. So in terms of what you do with advocacy, Brenda, how do you support people in loosening their hold on, I have to do it all?
Well, it's interesting because I just had this conversation with a client of mine whose husband has Alzheimer's and it's progressing. And all through their marriage, he was the one that took care of everything, and she was just the wife, and we were talking about her interests, and she says, I don't know what those interests are, because I'm trying to help her get some more time away from him. And every time we take, let's say, even grocery shopping away from her, she feels like she's now less than. Every time we say, why don't you go do what you would like to do? And she's like, I don't know what that is. How do I? So we had this conversation about what do we need to do to help her create herself without feeling guilty because her husband is losing himself. And so it's giving her permission in order for her to survive this transition with her husband, she does have to put some time and effort and get permission and get rid of the guilt. The guilt is what stalls us. And, you know, like Patricia's saying, the shame that stalls us. It was with my husband and I too, when we're getting ready to leave to go to Edmonton, which is 4.5 hours from us, for 7 weeks for treatment. And we're asking people to help us with our fencing for our farm, and feeling guilty that we were such bad farmers that we didn't get all our fencing done, all this done before we left. And we're feeling guilty that people are going to think that we are not good at taking care of our animals, but we didn't know we were going to have this time taken away from us for cancer treatment either. Right? Life still goes on. Right. So I think it's the shame and the guilt, and helping people feel a sense of compassion, a sense of, and same with what Chelsea is saying with RNs or caregivers, is that we end up feeling guilty that we can't handle it. And a lot of times we don't have managers who are willing to say, what can I do, without feeling like you're going to get penalized.
I'd like to add on to that, Brenda, and that is there's a sense of worthiness attached here. And I have deliberately had to create a life where I feel in control. When you're a caregiver, your sense of accomplishment has to do with somebody else getting better or functioning better or something, that word better. And when and if it doesn't happen, then it's like all your effort was for naught, right? Down the toilet. So I found, for me, people say, why is it you do, you write books and you do counseling and you speak and all these other activities? And I say, because I'm in control of it. And I get to have a sense of satisfaction now and then. And I'll tell you, from caregiving, from having caregiving from children to somebody dying to somebody with disabilities, you very little control. So no wonder you lose yourself.
Exactly. And trying to control the universe is what burns us out in life, period. And especially when there's something out of control, like someone being sick or having a disability, etc. We spend our lives trying to control things, when in reality it's really that's not where our value comes from. So one of the taking care of the caregivers that I hear here is get a coach that can help you identify what passions you have, or a counselor or a therapist who can support you in working through the shame and the worthiness issues and the challenges. Don't be afraid to go to your doctor and say, look, I'm feeling tired and run down. I might need an antidepressant. I might need some physical help. Whatever you think you need physiologically, go to a naturopath and get some things that support your energy. Take care of your body, your mind, your spirit, because if you don't have that, then the person who you're helping doesn't have you. So it's really important, not just for them, but for you. You deserve to take care of you just for you, not just because you're taking care of someone else. So Chelsea, what are the indicators that it's time to hire someone to help? What is some of the things that you can tell people that here's some ideas of when it's time to bring someone in to help you out?
Yeah, because you want it to be before you're overwhelmed, before you're close to burnout. You want it to be that proactive piece that we always, especially as RNs, talk about, but I think it's just when you're in the thick of it, it's really hard to notice. So sometimes it's when you have people who are constantly saying, like, are you okay? Like, are you tired? Like, is everything going okay? Like cueing you, like, oh,
or you look like crap.
Maybe I'm not doing so well. Or when you're laying in bed at night and you're like taking a deep breath, going, I'm looking at the month ahead and I don't know how I'm going to figure this out. Like, I've got appointments and I've got to toilet them 6 times a day. And I've got my grandchildren. I want to see my grandchildren play their volleyball game on Saturday. And I can't leave my house, or it's either a spouse or a loved one, or even if it's, so just thinking about, I always tell people, even sit down when I first do a care plan and I'm saying, you know what, they're often like, I don't know how I need help. And I'm like, just as you're going about your day, make a list. So you're cooking a meal and you're like, oh, I didn't have time to go grocery shopping. Jot it down. Or you're toileting them and you're like, oh my gosh, I couldn't pick up the Depends. Or, oh, I can't go to my kid's game on Saturday. Write it down. And then you'll look at this list and you'll see what, a pain point and be like, oh, I guess those are some things that I need to look at. So largely it's just having, if someone's, there who can step in and say, how do you need help? Here's how it looks. And then also, not everybody's good at everything, right? So you might have friends who step in and they're really good at, helping you drive around and run errands, but you just don't have someone who can help with some light housekeeping or meal prep, or vice versa. You have a friend who's like a go-getter cleaner and they'll come in, but you don't have anybody who can help drive to appointments. And it's that time. People sometimes think, oh, it's costly, I can't afford it. It's just sitting down and figuring out what value is my time worth, and what am I losing in not being able to, have a few hours a week, someone come in and just being able to do what you need to do.
My time and my well-being, because I guarantee getting sick or debilitated, putting your back out, lifting them on and off the toilet, etc., will cost you more than hiring someone proactively. So like I mentioned earlier, it took me a week, a month taking care of my mother in the later stages of her dementia, at least. And so that directly impacted my business. My income went down. So I either had to work longer or I needed to delegate. So I called in support and delegated many of the things. But some of the things you can't, because some of the things you have to advocate because you know the person. So you really need to figure out, well, if I get someone to clean my house, then I have time to take her to the doctor's appointments where I can advocate. So pick your battles. Pick the things that are really strategic versus trying to be all things to all people at all times. That's where we burn out. All right, Cheryl, did you want to add something real quick?
Well, the fact about the money, when I interviewed a man who was helping families that had cerebral palsy children, he blew me away with the statistic that it takes between $1 and $5 million to raise a child with cerebral palsy from birth to death. And I went, wow, that's why we never had money. Everything started more than we made. So a lot of times the money is a true issue, especially in the US. You're not going to get some of the things y'all may get without being who you want, but you're going to have to find somebody to pay for it here. But
exactly.
y'all
Yeah.
have all got so many really good points there.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does take a lot of money and effort to raise people with disabilities or challenges, etc. And there often are more resources available than we are aware of and that we think of. So one of the other things that I would say is, for sure, what a lot of these ladies have been advocating is educate yourself on what resources are available. And for the love of God, join a support group. I know many of you think, well, I don't have time for that, or I don't need that support, or whatever. You will hear about practical resources. Not only will you get that you're not alone in this, not only will you get some support from people who get it, have been in the trenches, know what you're going through, but you'll also get referrals, practical resources, and tips and hints that you would not get if you were not plugged into that community. So go to a support network to save you money, to save your sanity, and to save you a lot of time as well. All right.
And I think too, Jenna, it's kind of like what you said, Cheryl, before, is you're like, why me? Why me? The support groups help you to be a little bit more cognizant that, okay, there's a lot of us in this battle out there, and that support in that way too.
So there's so many topics that we could talk about in this. The impact on relationships, for instance, it puts a big strain on relationships. Again, get support proactively. Go to a marriage counselor, even if a couples counseling, because there is impact and it will ripple out to those closest to you. Let's talk about one last thing, and then I want to wrap up with you telling us how people can reach you, and if you have a gift for them, how they can get that. So let's talk about boundaries, because one of the biggest challenges, we talked a little bit about it, is that saying no. And women often thinking that it's our job to be the people pleasers, to be the ones who take care of everyone. How do we set boundaries for ourselves and for loved ones? What are some practical tips around that you would have for people from what you've learned? So how about we start with you, Brenda?
Oh boy, boundaries are my weakness.
For many,
Uh,
for many of us.
yeah. I believe that by actually feeling safe, if you have people around you feel safe with, they can help you with your boundaries. And I know for myself, that's what I needed. I had friends that said, it's okay for you to say no. It's okay for you to not do this or that. And it's really having a network of people you can feel safe with. And the people who don't allow you to have boundaries are probably not the people you want in your circle anyway.
How about they are definitely not the people you want in your circle?
They are definitely not.
Yeah, be willing
Yeah.
to say no to those who won't let you say no.
Exactly, right?
Awesome. Anybody else have any quick tips on boundary setting for yourself or loved ones?
Well, I love it's not good for me to say yes because it's telling me about my well-being. And I also like saying, oh, that space is taken up in my day timer. I think it's really, really important for us to put in our day timer, getting the pedicure, getting a nap. That's my time for nap. I don't, and in my little business that I do from my home, I don't book anything before 11 a.m. I've got other things to attend to. So I just say, nope, I'm not available. So use your day timer.
Yeah, that's a great one. All right. Anybody else? Any other boundary setting tips?
One of the things my sister taught me one time when I was having surgery, she said, Cheryl, you're always good at helping other people, but you won't let anybody help you. Think of it this way. If somebody says, can I do something for you? And you say no, you have taken away a blessing that they could have had. And that helped me to realize when two ladies showed up at my house with toilet brushes over their shoulders. And they said, we came to clean your toilets because we don't think your husband and kids will, because they were little.
Yeah.
And then another one said, I'm going to come and change your sheets every Friday. And that's the only thing either one of them did. But it was such a good spirit builder
Yeah.
to let somebody come in and do something.
Right. So the flip side of a boundary, the flip side of saying no is saying yes. Be willing to say yes to those who want to support you and help you. All right. So I just want to, and in terms of boundaries, again, be willing to set boundaries around other caregivers or professionals. When my mother was in a home, it was not a very good home, but it was the only one that she could afford and that we could get her in because there was no spaces. And so she, in her dementia, would do things like, it's a longer story, but she thought there was bugs everywhere. She thought she was crawling with bugs all the time and she wasn't sleeping and so forth, and that they weren't cleaning, and that's why she had bugs. And so if they weren't going to clean, well, then she would leave paper towels with poop all over the place and so forth to try and force them to clean. She was just trying to take care of herself. They retaliated. They were mean. They would leave her in her pee in her bed with it soaking, etc. So I had to set boundaries with them, but also really work with them to understand and come up with a solution. So I just had them put water in a spray bottle and have them spray down all of her nooks and crannies and along the baseboards every day. And she calmed down because the bug spray got rid of the bugs. And so she could sleep. And so now she thought everything was clean and safe. But had she not had someone pushing them, sitting down with the entire care group, including the owner of the home, and saying, this is not okay. You cannot leave my mother in her bed for 4 and 5 hours in her pee. If you do that again, I will bring charges. Let's solve the problem. Let's work together.
Right.
Let's be part of the solution, but setting boundaries. We will often set those for those that we care for, but we don't set them for ourselves nearly enough. So love yourself as much as you love your loved one, and be willing to set boundaries for them and for you. All right, let's wrap up with how people can find you. And if you have a gift for them or an opt-in or takeaway, let them know. So Brenda, I'll start with you. How can people find out more about you?
They can go to Pick My Brain, Brenda Pellin McIntosh, or they can email me at Brenda, BRENDA, at seniorsbestlife.ca. And on Pick My Brain, there is a free gift on there for a half hour to have a conversation with me.
Awesome. So pickmybrain.com or .ca or
.com.
.com, pickmybrain.com. All right. And Chelsea, how do people find out more about you and your organization?
So you can go to longevitycare.ca. And you can also, on there, you can ask for a free care consultation. So that's usually about an hour, and we come into the home and just create a bit of a care plan. And what would it look like? Where do your needs lie? And as well, info@longevitycare.ca. So those are the two best ways.
Beautiful. And so if you're not in Calgary and area, of course, there are caregiving organizations around you. Do your due diligence and look on reviews, Yelp and other places like that. So, and do check out several to see which one fits and feels best for you and for your loved one. Don't just take whatever comes along. There is a big difference in them. So find the good ones like Chelsea's. All right, Cheryl.
If you will go to my website, which is cheryl-coaches.com, I've got 3 different gifts on there. You can choose which one you want. One is for role reversals, some tips to help you manage. And then another one is, well, there's 2 others that are there. You can choose from that. And if you want to write me, it's just cheryl@cheryl-coaches.com.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Cheryl, say it one more time. Cheryl at
Cheryl-coaches.com.
Okay, so dash, not underscore. All right. And what's the name of the book that you wrote? I know you've written a few, but what's one of your books?
It's called It Takes Courage to Be a Caregiver, and it's on Amazon and Kindle.
All right. Thank you. And Patricia.
Thank you.
I'm actually putting in the chat box a link to a free ebook called Stress Solutions, Tried and True Resiliency Strategies for Busy Lives. You just need to go to solutionsforresilience.com, and it's a free ebook. And I've put the link in the chat box.
All right.
Yeah, solutionsforresilience.com, and it'll come up.
All right. And for all of you ladies, if you want to put your links, etc., into the chat, please do. If Andres has got him, he will put them in there for you. And before we wrap up with one little tidbit or takeaway, thanks, Cheryl. I'll put yours in there as well. Oops. No, I just got the first part, the HTTPS, so need the rest. Before we wrap up with any takeaways, one of the other things we didn't talk about, but I think is really important, especially with regards to dealing with relationship changes, dealing with the stress, dealing with all of this stuff, is that there is also a tremendous amount of grief in being a caregiver. There are a lot of gifts and a lot of benefits, but there is a lot of grief, because whether or not you're losing your parent twice, once physically, in their decline, and then second mentally, and then third they finally die, or you're dealing with the grief of the loss of an ideal around who your child could be and isn't. There is grief in all of these things that we deal with. So please get support for dealing with that as well. Get a counselor, a therapist, to join a grief group, and make space for you to grieve. We're often so busy coping, we forget to pause long enough to check in, to cry, to have that moment of saying, well, fuck, that's not how I thought my life was going to go. Really just be with what is and its impact on us. So you are too important to not take care of yourself. You are too important to the world. You are too important to yourself. And you are too important to others to not take care of the number one person in your life. And despite what everyone else will tell you, is you. So what's one last thing you'd like to leave everyone with? I'll start with Brenda, and then Chelsea, then Cheryl, then Patricia. One last thing and we'll wrap up.
You have the right to be happy.
Amen, sister. Thank you. Chelsea.
As mentioned, don't wait for a crisis moment. Be proactive and ask for help.
Beautiful. Thank you. Cheryl.
I'm going to end with a quote again, but it's have compassion for yourself, take occasional breaks, seek professional help, and manage your emotions.
Thank you. All right, Patricia.
From the ancient philosopher Hillel, if I am not for me, who will be? If I am only for me, what is the point?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you. That's a great balance. And thank you for being here. If you have been watching this, then I'm assuming that this is you taking care of yourself. So thank you for doing that. Ladies, thank you for being part of the solution to this big challenge and growing challenge. We have an aging demographic, and there are millions of boomers and zoomers who are, and Gen X, who are now dealing with all of the challenges that we've been talking about. So please be one of those ones who is sustainable, happy, joyful, and creating a life that you love while being that supportive giver. Take care of the caregiver. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a great week. Bye for now.